All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We hear so much in Christian circles about giving, sacrificing, and loving unconditionally. But what happens when that love seems to literally drain the life right out of you? Today, we are tackling the profound intersection of fervent biblical love and the absolute necessity of maintaining healthy, Jesus-modeled boundaries.
So, does Christian love mean just tolerating everything? It's a heavy question, right? So many believers feel burned out, resentful, or even trapped in toxic dynamics purely because they assume loving deeply means acting as a human doormat. They think, well, to be a good Christian, I just have to accept every burden and tolerate every bad behavior. But we really need to pause and ask if that is truly what the Bible commands, or if we've kind of warped the definition of love into something God never intended.
To get to the bottom of this, we're going to walk through 5 key areas today. First, the love covers misconception. 2, codependency versus true sacrificial love. 3, the boundary-setting Jesus. 4, what love does not cover. And 5, practicing healthy biblical boundaries in our everyday lives.
All right, part 1, the love covers misconception. We got to start with 1 Peter 4:8. Love covers over a multitude of sins. It's a beautiful verse, but honestly, it is so frequently taken completely out of context to justify enabling bad behavior. What the Apostle Peter actually meant here is interpersonal grace. We're supposed to forgive the minor offenses, the snide remarks, the minor annoyances, the everyday frictions, just to preserve unity. It basically means not keeping a running tally of every little wrong. But it absolutely does not mean sweeping abuse, addiction, or severe harm under the rug.
Actually, if we look at the Hebrew roots associated with covering sin, like the word kafar, it literally translates to containment. Think of it like a quarantine. Love is meant to contain sin so it doesn't spread like a virus through a family or a community. It is definitely not about blindly hiding sin from necessary accountability. True love contains the damage and actively seeks healing, rather than just letting the destruction continue unchecked.
Moving on to part 2, codependency versus sacrificial love.
Now, we have to confront a pretty difficult reality here. Sometimes what we call Christian sacrifice is actually just codependency masquerading as love. Picture a mother, weeping, totally desperate to protect her adult son from the consequences of his substance abuse, truly believing her enabling is love. But codependency is actually driven by a self-serving need for control and validation. It's needing to fix someone else so you can feel secure or needed or righteous. It might look like you're putting on the armor of God for a noble battle, but you're actually fighting the wrong war entirely.
When we really contrast these two side by side, it all boils down to motive. When I'm being codependent, my actions are totally fear-based. I'm afraid to say no, or maybe I'm terrified of not being needed. This rescuer mindset inevitably leads straight to resentment and burnout. Sacrificial love, on the other hand, that requires emotional health. It operates from a totally secure identity in Christ. You give because you're already full of God's grace, not because you're desperately trying to fill some empty void inside yourself.
Which brings us to part 3, the boundary-setting Jesus. If anyone knew how to love perfectly, it was obviously Jesus. And it's actually fascinating to look at the Gospels through the lens of boundaries. Think about it. Jesus had far more pressure and responsibility than any of us ever will. Yet he never burned out. Why? Because he modeled living within human limitations. I mean, the guy actually slept during a raging storm. He constantly left needy crowds just to go pray alone. He didn't cave to people-pleasing when the Pharisees tried to bait him. And he flat out said no to manipulation. Jesus wasn't just nice to everyone. He was perfectly loving. And sometimes true love requires a really firm boundary.
And just look at how he healed. He didn't just passively fix people while they laid there helplessly. He consistently required them to take some responsibility. He asked the paralyzed man, "Do you want to get well?" He told him to get up and pick up his mat. He required faith, and he required action. Jesus didn't do the work for people that they needed to do for themselves. That right there is a profound lesson in healthy boundaries and true empowerment.
Let's shift to part 4, what love does not cover.
Understanding how Jesus operated really helps us clarify exactly what our own love is absolutely not supposed to cover up. We are explicitly instructed by the Apostle Paul to distance ourselves from believers who are living destructively. Love does not quietly cover up abuse, manipulation, or unrepentant sin. No way. Sometimes allowing someone to face the tough consequences of their actions is exactly the strong medicine they need to jolt them awake. Protecting an abuser or an addict from the fallout of their choices isn't love, it's enabling, plain and simple.
And here is a massive distinction we have to make. Unconditional love does not equal an unconditional relationship. God unconditionally loves everyone, sure, but he doesn't maintain close, intimate fellowship with someone actively rebelling against him. A human relationship without conditions or boundaries actually enables self-deception. It harms the destructive person by letting them think their behavior is perfectly fine, which ultimately just separates them further from God and reality.
Finally, Part 5. Practicing healthy biblical boundaries.
So how do we actually live this out? In our homes or our workplaces or our churches? Well, setting boundaries isn't unchristian at all. It is actually an act of good stewardship over the life and the energy that God gave you. Emotionally healthy love means you can say no without being completely consumed by guilt. It means you follow Proverbs 4:23 to actively guard your heart, you face conflict in a healthy way, and you absolutely refuse to enable toxic behavior. Doing this is what allows you to serve and love from an overflow of grace rather than constantly trying to pour from an empty cup.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take a hard look at your own relationships. Think about the places where you feel the most drained or resentful. Now, ask yourself this really hard question. Are your actions in those relationships truly edifying and building the other person up in Christ, or are you just acting out of a fear of saying no? Reflect on that, and consider whether it's finally time to step out of codependency and into the true, liberating, boundary-setting love of Christ.